Hello everybody and welcome back to another Toonkind at 12 FPS. My name is Avi and today I'll be taking on a hilarious undertaking of doing a solo FPS, which means all the characters are played by me, Avi. The main characters for this FPS are Shiro Azumi, your local real kind detective, and Yuina Kishimoto, your local artist boy. Yeah. Real quick before I begin, though, I do want to say that this entire FPS was pre-written and everything in it was pre-rolled. So I wrote out an entire script, and I say script, but it's actually like, I guess you could say a fic, or like a ficlet, or whatever you want to call it. So I'm just gonna drop something in the rolling channel real quick. This is the entire document for this FPS. You're welcome to read along with me. This is going to be the first time that I read this entire thing in one sitting. So hold on to your hats. Also, if you're listening to the recording, I will be putting the link in the description. Free to view, free to read whenever you want. But yeah. As I take a quick sip of my water. Alright. Okay. Here we go. The cafe is quiet, as it usually is. It's part of the reason why Yuina keeps coming back here. Where the station is crowded, which makes it a perfect well of inspiration, a good place to people watch and grab something to eat if his funds allow for it. The cafe is small and does not see many customers, making it an ideal place to stop and focus. But it's not the only reason that he's in here at Gris. Even if he has long since gifted the painting to Arata, he still comes by to sit in its presence. There is something comforting about the Himayuri. He'd call it something similar to a mother's embrace, but that might be a little too on the nose, and a bit silly in retrospect. But nonetheless, he sits at the booth across from the painting, his mother's artistic form in view, as he pores over his sketchbook and absent-mindedly forgets the cup of coffee that had been left for him in favor of his artwork. This is, as silly as it is, a common occurrence, and one that Satoru has long since gotten used to. Yuina will finish his food in due time, even if it takes a reminder or two. Sometimes Satoru feels as though he's adopted another child in the artist. Sometimes Yuina wonders if it'd be too odd to say that the cafe owner feels a lot like a father figure. So, it's quiet. And Yuina busies himself with his artwork at the booth across from the Himayuri, and Boss busies himself with a few dishes that need to be cleaned. And then the bell above the door rings. Excuse me. Welcome, Satoru starts, but catches himself the moment that he sees who it is at the entrance. Oh, it's you. With an introduction like that, Yuina pries his gaze away from his sketchbook and looks towards the newcomer, only to see a familiar face. It's Azumi. The young man shuffles, his weight shifting from one foot to the other in a manner that can be considered uncomfortable as he looks around, and Yuina barely catches the remnants of a plastered smile slipping from Azumi's expression to give way to something far more neutral. Didn't expect to see you here. I hope you don't mind, Azumi replies to the cafe owner, and there's something in the way that he speaks and the way he carries himself that's different than the last time Yuina had seen him in person. but he can't quite piece together what it is. I just happened to be in the area and wanted to slip away from the crowds. There is a pause, long and heavy, as Boss stares with a raised brow at the young man. And then he shrugs. Fine by me. Take a seat. And so Azumi lets out a breath through his nose, glancing around the cafe, and, he most certainly noticed Yuina making brief eye contact before turning away and hurrying away from the door. Yuina, however, reacts quickly. Wait, Azumi-san, he says, and Azumi freezes and stiffens. Would you like to sit here? The tension is palpable as the other turns to face him, an aura of discomfort hidden beneath the neutral expression Azumi wears as he stares between Yuina and the rather artistic mess he's made of the table. But, despite clearly not wanting to, he relents and takes the seat across from the other. What do you want? That's what's different about him. The aura of pleasantries that follow his persona of the detective prince seems to be folded up and tucked away elsewhere as Azumi crosses his arms on the top of the table and levels a suspicious gaze in Yuina's direction. The genuineness bleeds through much more clearly than that one time years ago. Not a split second, but a whole animated scene of distress, but not quite hatred. Not yet, at any rate. It will probably be a struggle to keep it like that. Yuina knows better than anyone else that he is not exactly the best at navigating delicate conversations. But if Azumi wants honesty, he might as well be straightforward. I wanted to talk to you, Yuina answers rather plainly. It's been years since we've been able to, after all. The suspicious gaze lingers as Yuina gazes back, but eventually Azumi relents, seemingly satisfied with whatever it is he is looking for, or perhaps not finding what it is he is looking for, and sinks into the back of his seat. His arms fold against the front of his chest and taps a finger against one arm. About what? And so Yuina sets the sketchbook to the side of the table and leans against it, arms resting at the top as he fixes Azumi with a furrowed-browed look. There is no ill intent, no anger or disappointment in his expression or his tone as he answers with a simple set of 3 words. Are you all right? There is a certain way to how Azumi acts. Yuina knows better than most, has known since he first started learning the arts, that people are multifaceted in many fascinating and contradictory ways. He's learned how to watch for such things when he is out people-watching and letting it be a source of inspiration for new pieces. The way people act when they think no one is looking, the tells of their thoughts and the way they move and gesture and express themselves. He knows how to look for it. Like now, for instance. Azumi is not putting on the Detective Prince facade for him during this conversation. That likely is because of one of 2 things. That Azumi feels comfortable enough not to hide behind it, or that he knows that Yuina already knows, and by extension knows that there is not much merit in upholding such a front. Knowing their current relationship, it's likely the latter, but nonetheless it brings a certain kind of relief to Yuina to know that Azumi is not pretending to be nice. This is a much more natural, much more genuine version of the young detective. It suits him. But it makes it all the easier to see that when Azumi huffs, rolls his eyes, and answers with a simple, I'm fine, it is all an act. So Yuina's frown deepens, eyes kept glued towards the other. He does not lean back, though, the intense glare practically boring a hole into where Azumi is sitting directly across from him, and he does not realize how much time has passed into silence with him like that until the young detective shifts uncomfortably. He leans back slightly, no longer nearly shoving himself across the table, and decides the bluntness to continue carrying him further through this conversation. I have more than enough reason not to believe you, Azumi-san. You did just try to turn yourself in to the police the moment you returned to Okashima, causing quite a lot of people an undue amount of concern. So, forgive me if I'm not inclined to. Sorry. So forgive me if I'm inclined not to agree with your sentiment. Azumi flinches at that, body and posture tensing and his expression turning into a downright scowl. He glares right back at Yuina, but the ferocity is at odds with the exhaustion present in his current mood. Oh, there is so much to unpack from that alone, but Yuina bites back a remark as the other replies. Well, what do you want me to say? Do you want me to unload every single thought I've had since getting here? No, that's not what I asked. I asked if you're alright, and you lied to my face. Yuina all but ignores the bitterness pointed like a knife at him. Because it's not a weapon. Not really. Just a means of defense, a way to push distance between himself and Azumi. What I want is for you to admit that there is something wrong, especially when there definitely is and others can clearly see it. You are so caught up in the idea of presenting yourself in one way that you don't know how to let it go, even when the people around you can see past your facade, so you cling to it like a lifeline. What I want is for you to stop doing that. And why would I do that? More specifically, wrapped in a barbed wire tone. Why would I do that around you? Maybe because we have a lot more in common than you realize. And Azumi scoffs. Don't make me laugh. Is it not true? Yuina retorts with a hardened look. Whether their intentions were political or material, both of our father figures have used us for their own gain. Don't you dare pretend to know what it's like. Pretend! No, you severely misunderstand. I know what it is like to have an authoritative figure in my life leave behind nothing but a legacy of crime, hurt, pain, and suffering. What do you think I went through for most of my childhood? For most of my artistic career? Masuyama claimed my work as his own to rise in fame. Endo used your abilities for his own political advancement. Do you not think that, even to the smallest degree, I might understand your suffering, the anger, the hatred, the want to be free? Then Azumi stops. Whatever insult on his tongue freezes as he seems to realize that he simply does not have it in him. Instead, he falls silent with a punctuated huff and forces himself to look away, posture becoming much more closed off. By the gods, I hate you so much. I'd rather take that over your Saturn persona, Yuina replies, as he slowly allows himself to calm down. That is what this has always been about, hasn't it? Finding a way to bridge the gap between them, or a way past the distance that Azumi keeps insisting on putting between himself and everyone around him. It's likely the most frustrating thing about trying to talk to him at the moment, but if the end result is making a much more personal connection, then he would try. If not for his own sake, then for Azumi's. In the midst of the silence that follows, Satoru comes by to deliver their food, a plate of curry for each of them. There is a brief moment in which he checks in on both young men, but Yuina quickly and quietly reassures him that everything is currently alright. It is after Boss leaves, though, that Yuina, mid-bite, realizes that Azumi doesn't so much as move to eat from his meal. So, seeing another opportunity, he breaks the silence. Why did you turn yourself in? Azumi glances in his direction, a brow raised, before he shrugs and sighs. Perhaps I'd gotten it in my head that it was simply the right thing to do. He glances away again. Justice for what had happened, all that I'd done, and all the lives I'd killed and ruined. It seemed fitting for someone like me. Someone like you. You know, a murderer? Yuina frowns at that, finishing a bite of his food before he moves to reach for his sketchbook and pencil. Maybe so, but there is a lot of nuance involved in your particular situation, isn't there? When Azumi gives him a questioning look, he continues, There is no denying that you've done terrible things in the pursuit of your justice, but at the same time, the root cause of it all was something beyond your control. Someone, in fact. In a way, you are taking responsibility for something that was done to you by him. Is that really something that can be considered justice? When it is so unfair to someone who, in a way, was also a victim. Another shift in tone. Something a bit more defensive, though not quite as barbed. I don't like the implication of that wording. Azumi finally turns back to the table, leaning to begin eating from his plate at last. But I suppose that has some merit. Nonetheless, it feels as though there is far too much separation between what I and Endo did. No matter how you look at it, you cannot erase the fact that I was complicit in those plans. No, I guess not. Yuina concedes, and tapping the eraser end of his pencil to the paper of his sketchbook for a moment as he thinks. And then, looking back towards Azumi, he asks another difficult question. Would you say that you're different now than you were back then? Azumi blinks, staring back like he does not completely understand. What do you mean? A shrug, and Yuina starts sketching. It's usually not something you notice in the present, and it takes quite a lot of introspection to really parse out. I should know I'm not the same person I was before my mentor confessed. I'd argue it's the same for you, too. A pause, and he lifts his hand to point at the detective with the tip of his pencil. After all, a group of people came with you for you. If they truly know that your Detective Prince act is an act and yet still remain, that means that they must see something in you worth caring for, and you have not driven them away. Which means you're not the same as when we'd last seen each other. You're not alone anymore. His hand lowers as he tries to gauge the other's reaction. However, if Azumi's shoulders tense at the words, Yuina does not notice. I suppose the question now becomes, he continues, going back to drawing, who you are trying to convince. What? You know better than anyone else, aside from Arata himself, what the legal system is like, Yuina clarifies. Putting yourself through that, even if it is true that you are guilty, is not justice. Especially not when you've already made great strides in bettering yourself. It feels less like what you claim it to be, and more like you are trying to run away from something. In the pause that follows, Azumi tightens in on himself, arms crossing against his chest in lieu of hugging himself as he forces himself to look away from the other. And Yuina pauses as he catches the reaction. He pulls back, surprised, and slides the sketchbook into his lap so that it is now leaning against the edge of the table as he watches Azumi closely. It's not quite an apology, but the air of one still lingers. I may have said too much. In a tone that is unbefitting of the young detective, he replies, "You are far too observant for your own good." It is then that he remembers something from years ago. A chance meeting at the planetarium, long before it had been closed for renovations. Azumi had followed him all the way back to the Shibusawa station, and they spoke. People watching and idle chatter. And when Azumi had asked how he appeared in Yuina's eyes, and when he gave his answer, the detective's reaction had caught him off guard, the split-second reveal of the young man beneath the facade. Yuina glances back to the page, and his sketchbook is still open on. He'd managed to capture that look on paper back then, but even so, he has to wonder, what is it exactly that Azumi is still hiding? What is it that he is afraid of? To him, the answer is clear, so he lets out a sigh and begins to draw something else. "I think I used to do something similar," he says after a moment of hesitation. "After we had changed Masuyama's heart and I had to move into the dorms at the high school, there were times where the whispers of other students made me feel as though I was safer in my own room, and so I would keep there for hours and force myself to focus on my work. It certainly didn't help my art slump. In fact, it only made me feel as though I was trying to measure up to a certain form of perfection I could never achieve." When Yuina glances back in Azumi's direction, he comes to find that the other's gaze has turned towards the painting, the Himeyuri. Another pause, not out of hesitation, but out of recognition. He's seen that emotion elsewhere. "You don't hate me," he says. "If you did, you would be pretending, wouldn't you?" Azumi, letting out an amused huff, rolls his eyes as he turns back to eat more of his meal. "I despise that honesty of yours. Now that," Yuina chuckles, "I can believe." The two take a moment, Azumi slowly but surely finishing his plate, and Yuina slowly but surely allowing his pencil to create a comprehensible image. The shapes fill a silence that is more comfortable between the two, until one decides to break it. "I do envy you, though," Azumi says, once again glancing towards the painting hanging on the wall across from their table. When Yuina looks up at him, and then turns as well, he continues. "The image you have of her is one you built for yourself, based on a single painting of her image, but I have many more memories of mine than you would have yours." Yuina, blinking, looks back to him with a confused yet concerned crease in his brow. "What do you mean?" "Never mind." The detective backpedals and turns his gaze back to the table, pushing his now empty plate off to the side. "I may have said too much." And, continuing to frown, Yuina turns his attention to the drawing he is working on. Perhaps it has something to do with the look that the other had, like something along the lines of being seen so holy and being so deathly afraid of it. But then again, he can't say that he knows what Azumi is thinking. And that's it. Thank you everybody for listening in, both now and in the future. For now, I am going to bid you all a good time zone. Bye!